You're in a conversation when it happens, a sentence so careless it stops you mid-thought. Everyone else nods along as if nothing strange was said, yet something inside you pulls back, not in anger, but in quiet recognition, because you've just witnessed the invisible line between wisdom and its commensal absence. And that moment matters more than people realize, because intelligence is not measured by how much you know. It is measured by what you refuse to say. The unwise feel compelled to broadcast every thought the moment it forms, believing that volume equals value, that confidence comes from certainty, that speaking fast and often is proof of strength. But the wise understand something far more unsettling, that certain words expose your character more clearly than any resume title or credential ever could. This is not about judging others. It is about recognizing patterns in ourselves, because every one of us has spoken foolishly at some point. Awareness is the first step toward wisdom, and examining these patterns without ego is how growth actually begins. Epictetus warned us long ago that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we may listen more and speak less. Yet, most people reverse this ratio completely, reacting before reflecting, speaking before thinking, filling silence out of discomfort rather than intention, and in doing so they quietly sabotage their own credibility, their relationships, and their future. Today we begin examining the first of these patterns, not to shame, but to sharpen awareness, because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The first phrase sounds confident on the surface, even impressive to the untrained ear, but it is one of the clearest signals of intellectual carelessness, and that phrase is this: I know everything. The moment someone claims complete understanding, they reveal that they understand almost nothing about wisdom itself, because certainty delivered without humility is not strength, it is blindness. You hear it in everyday life. I know everything about marketing. I've completely figured out relationships. I understand exactly how this business works. The words arrive wrapped in confidence, but what's missing is far more important than what's said. There is no space for doubt, no acknowledgement that complexity might exist beyond their current frame, no recognition that reality is layered and constantly shifting. Consider a man named Tom, a capable professional who worked in software development for just a few years, and somewhere along the way, he began prefacing every opinion with absolute certainty. In meetings, he would cut people off mid-sentence with phrases like, "I've seen this before, I know what works." When new frameworks appeared, he dismissed them without examination, insisting his existing knowledge was enough. And at first, people tolerated it. Then they adjusted, and eventually they stopped inviting him into planning conversations altogether, not out of spite, but out of necessity. Because why invite someone who has already decided they have nothing left to learn? When a major project required unfamiliar technology, Tom volunteered to lead. He rejected documentation, skipped training, and built everything on assumptions instead of understanding. And 3 months later, the project collapsed, not because the problem was unsolvable, but because arrogance had replaced curiosity. And when failure became undeniable, Tom blamed the technology, the timeline, the team, everything, except the one thing that mattered: his refusal to admit he didn't know enough. Years passed, and Tom stayed exactly where he was, while peers who asked questions and acknowledged gaps advanced steadily ahead. And this pattern is not rare. It is predictable because psychology has already mapped it. The Dunning-Kruger effect shows that those with limited knowledge often overestimate their competence, while true experts do the opposite. They underestimate their mastery because they've seen how vast the field really is. When you claim complete knowledge, you are not announcing confidence. You are announcing that your understanding is shallow enough to feel complete. And that is why Socrates' most famous statement was not a declaration of brilliance, but an admission of humility. I know that I know nothing, not as false modesty, but as recognition that genuine knowledge expands awareness of what remains unknown. The wisest person in any room is rarely the loudest voice. They are often the one asking the most precise questions, because every domain, whether physics, psychology, business, relationships, or even cooking, contains layers. Most people never reach, and stopping at the surface while mistaking it for depth is how growth quietly dies. Even Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire, wrote daily reflections, questioning his own judgments. And if someone with that level of power and experience maintained intellectual humility, what excuse do the rest of us have? The Stoic lesson here is simple but uncomfortable. The moment you stop learning is the moment you begin defending your limitations. Certainty freezes you in place, while curiosity keeps you alive, and wisdom does not demand that you pretend to know less than you do. It asks only that you remain open to what you don't yet understand, because claiming complete knowledge doesn't make you look strong. It makes you predictable, and predictable minds are fragile minds. This is only the beginning, because the next phrase does something far more dangerous. It doesn't just halt growth, it convinces you that staying exactly as you are is a virtue. The second phrase sounds harmless, even honest, and that is precisely why it is so dangerous, because it disguises surrender as self-acceptance and weakness as authenticity. And that phrase is this: that's just how I am. 5 simple words that quietly lock a person in place. 5 words that turn habits into destiny and flaws into identity. You hear it everywhere. I'm just brutally honest. That's how I am. I have a temper. That's just me. I'm always late. It's my personality. And every time the phrase is spoken, something subtle but permanent happens. Responsibility dissolves, growth pauses, and the speaker gives themselves permission to remain unchanged. Stoicism teaches us that character is not discovered, it is built. Yet this phrase does the opposite. It freezes character at its weakest point and calls that honesty. Consider a man named David, talented, intelligent, respected for his skills, but chronically unreliable. With time meetings started without him, deadlines passed before he finished, and every time the issue was raised, his response never changed. I'm just not a clock watcher, that's who I've always been. So the team adapted. They built buffers covered for him, made excuses to clients, until the day it mattered most. A critical pitch, a single moment where precision was non-negotiable. The client arrived early, the team was ready, and David walked in nearly 40 minutes late, casual, unapologetic, repeating the same line, "You know me, I'm not a morning person." And the client walked out, opportunity lost, not because David lacked talent, but because he mistook comfort for truth. When confronted, David was genuinely confused. He believed that honesty about his flaws excused him from responsibility for them, and this is the illusion this phrase creates. It makes people believe that self-awareness alone is enough, when in reality self-awareness without effort is just self-indulgence. That's just how I am does not describe personality. It announces surrender. It confuses patterns you developed with traits you were born with, treating learned behavior as if it were written into your DNA. And the most dangerous part is that it reinforces itself. Every repetition strengthens the habit. Every excuse hardens the identity until change feels impossible, not because it is, but because it has been rejected too many times. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply when he wrote that you have power over your mind, not outside events, and that realization is strength, because if your behavior is truly fixed, then effort is pointless, discipline is meaningless, and growth is a lie. But Stoicism rejects this completely. It insists that we are works in progress, not finished products, and that who you are today is not who you must be tomorrow. Growth begins the moment you accept that your current state is not fate, it is choice. Uncomfortable, yes, but liberating, because if it is chosen, it can be changed. The Stoic does not deny their weaknesses, they take ownership of them without surrendering to permanence. They replace, "That's just how I am," with something far more powerful. This is something I struggle with, and I am actively working to improve it. And in that sentence, There is dignity, accountability, and strength. A flaw becomes a trait not because it exists, but because it is addressed. Ignored flaws harden into identity. Examined flaws soften into growth. This phrase limits only you, but the next one goes further. It wounds others while allowing the speaker to feel righteous, and it reveals a lack of wisdom disguised as honesty. The third phrase is one many people believe makes them virtuous, when in reality it exposes a failure of judgment, empathy, and self-awareness. And that phrase is, "No offense, but..." It is often spoken as if it were a shield, a moral disclaimer that excuses whatever harm comes next. Yet the truth is far simpler and more uncomfortable the moment you feel the need to say, "No offense." You already know that what follows is likely to wound, embarrass, or diminish someone, and instead of stopping you, proceed anyway. Stoicism teaches that awareness without restraint is not wisdom, it is indulgence. And this phrase perfectly illustrates that mistake. Consider a woman named Rachel celebrating her birthday surrounded by friends, relaxed, open, and emotionally exposed in the way people often are when they feel safe. And across the table sits a relative she has not seen in some time who leans forward and says loudly, "No offense, but are you still with him? I always thought you could do better." The room falls silent, not because the words were true or false, but because they were unnecessary, poorly timed, and delivered without care for dignity. Rachel smiles politely, excuses herself, and returns later with red eyes, while the speaker remains confused, convinced they did nothing wrong because they had warned her first. This confusion is the core problem, the belief that honesty is defined only by accuracy and not by intention, context, or consequence. No offense does not reduce harm, it confirms awareness of harm. It is not honesty, it is permission-seeking from one's own conscience. The Stoics never argued against truth, but they insisted that truth must be guided by reason. And reason includes understanding the emotional state of the person before you, the setting you are in, and whether your words serve growth or simply your own need to speak. Seneca wrote that wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for kindness, and kindness does not mean silence or flattery. It means choosing words that correct without humiliating and clarify without cutting. People who rely on no offense often confuse bluntness with courage, believing that saying whatever enters their mind is proof of strength, when in reality it is proof of a lack of discipline. A disciplined mind pauses, evaluates, and asks not only is this true, but also is this necessary and is this helpful? Marcus Aurelius reminded himself repeatedly that speech should pass through reason before leaving the mouth, because once spoken words cannot be retrieved, only endured. The damage caused by this phrase often extends beyond the immediate moment. It erodes trust, creates distance, and teaches others that vulnerability around you is unsafe. Over time, people stop sharing openly, not because they fear truth, but because they fear carelessness. The speaker, meanwhile, remains convinced of their own honesty, blind to the social and emotional wreckage they leave behind. And this blindness is the true mark of intellectual immaturity. Stoicism does not ask us to suppress truth. It asks us to master ourselves. And mastery includes knowing when silence is wiser than speech, and when correction should be private rather than public. There are moments when difficult truth must be spoken, but the Stoic understands that delivery is part of truth itself, because truth that destroys trust achieves nothing lasting. If something must be said, say it without an audience, without theatrics, and without the need to announce your virtue beforehand. Replace no offense with humility, curiosity, and restraint. Or better yet, ask yourself whether the urge to speak comes from care for the other person or from the ego's desire to feel superior. Wisdom is not proven by how sharp your words are, but by how carefully you choose them. And the next phrase reveals an even deeper confusion, one where cruelty is not just excused but celebrated as moral strength. The fourth phrase is the most destructive of all, because it disguises itself as virtue while quietly poisoning relationships, credibility, and opportunity. And that phrase is, I'm just being honest. On the surface, it sounds admirable, even courageous. Yet, in practice, it is often nothing more than cruelty wearing the mask of moral superiority. People who use this phrase believe honesty excuses all damage, as if truth alone absolves them from responsibility for timing, tone, and human impact. But Stoicism teaches the opposite, that wisdom lies not merely in speaking truth, but in speaking it rightly. Imagine a manager named Greg, proud of what he called radical honesty, who believed leadership meant saying whatever he thought the moment it appeared in his mind. In meetings, he openly criticized employees in front of their peers, dismissing their work with comments like, "This isn't good enough," or "Did you even think this through?" And whenever discomfort appeared on someone's face, he defended himself with the same line, "I'm just being honest." Over time, the room grew quieter, not because the team had become more competent, but because they had become afraid. Ideas stopped flowing, initiative faded, and creativity died under the weight of public humiliation. Talented people left others disengaged, and still, Greg saw no connection between his words and the environment he created, because in his mind, honesty made him right, and sensitivity made everyone else weak. The breaking point came during a client presentation when a junior employee stumbled under pressure, and instead of supporting her, Greg interrupted to point out her unpreparedness again, hiding behind honesty, and the client, witnessing not truth but disrespect, quietly decided not to work with them. This is the hidden cost of weaponized honesty. It destroys trust, not only internally, but externally. And once trust is gone, competence no longer matters. Marcus Aurelius understood that truth without wisdom is incomplete, which is why he wrote about speaking only what is necessary and beneficial, even when it is true. The Stoics never celebrated bluntness for its own sake. They celebrated restraint, because restraint is evidence of control, and control is the foundation of character. When someone says, "I'm just being honest," what they often mean is, "I value expressing myself more than preserving your dignity," and that is not honesty, it is ego. Real honesty requires courage of a different kind. The courage to consider the effect of your words, the courage to delay gratification, and the courage to admit that your delivery may be flawed, even if your observation is accurate. Wisdom asks different questions before speaking, not just, "Is this true?" but, "Is this the right moment? Is this the right setting? And am I the right person to say this?" People who rely on this phrase skip those questions entirely, choosing the comfort of feeling authentic over the discipline of being effective. Seneca warned that harsh truth delivered without care does not enlighten, it hardens, and hardened people do not grow, they defend. A Stoic understands that the goal of speech is not to discharge one's thoughts, but to improve the situation. And if words fail to do that, silence is often the wiser choice. This does not mean avoiding difficult conversations. It means having them with intention privately, when possible calmly rather than theatrically, and with genuine concern for the other person's development rather than your own sense of righteousness. The person who truly values honesty does not need to announce it. Their words carry weight because they are measured, and their feedback is trusted because it is paired with respect. When honesty becomes an excuse for insensitivity, it ceases to be virtuous and becomes destructive. And the irony is that those who use this phrase most often are usually the least receptive to honesty themselves. They demand tolerance for their bluntness but react defensively when their own flaws are named, revealing that what they seek is not truth but dominance. Stoicism exposes this contradiction clearly, reminding us that strength is not loud, wisdom is not sharp, and truth does not need to wound to be real. The disciplined mind understands that honesty is not about unloading thoughts. It is about choosing words that serve clarity without sacrificing humanity. And those who fail to learn this lesson often find themselves alone, convinced they are misunderstood, when in reality they have simply mistaken carelessness for courage. The next phrase goes even further because it removes not just compassion, but responsibility itself. And when responsibility disappears, growth becomes impossible. The fifth phrase freezes growth at its root because it rejects responsibility entirely, and that phrase is, "It's not my fault." These words sound harmless, even defensive, yet beneath them lies a mindset that guarantees repetition of the same mistakes over and over again. When someone constantly reaches for this phrase, they are not explaining circumstances, they are surrendering agency. Every failure is redirected outward. Every consequence assigned to bad luck, unfair people, poor timing, or flawed systems. And while some of those factors may be real, the Stoics were clear that reality does not excuse abdication of responsibility. Consider a man named Kevin, who blamed everything in his life on forces beyond his control. Missed deadlines were caused by traffic, job losses were caused by biased managers, broken relationships were caused by demanding partners, and each time, the same phrase appeared like a shield: "It's not my fault." Over time, the pattern became obvious to everyone except him, because nothing ever changed, not his habits, not his preparation, not his outcomes. Opportunities passed, not because the world was cruel, but because he refused to examine his own role in what kept repeating. Epictetus taught that life is divided into two categories: what is within our control and what is not. But what many people miss is that this teaching places enormous power back into our hands, because while we cannot control events, we always control our response. When someone says, "It's not my fault," what they are really saying is, "I refuse to learn from this," and learning is the only path forward. The danger of this phrase is subtle because it offers immediate relief to the ego while quietly eroding long-term strength. By avoiding discomfort now, you guarantee stagnation later. The Stoic does not deny external factors, but neither do they dwell on them, because dwelling on them produces nothing. Instead, they ask a different question: what part of this was within my influence? Because that question leads to action, and action leads to growth. When you acknowledge even a small degree of responsibility, you reclaim power, power to adjust, power to prepare differently, power to choose better next time. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself repeatedly that obstacles are not barriers but material, for virtue and responsibility is the tool that turns setbacks into instruction. Saying "it's not my fault" closes the door to that instruction, while saying "here's what I can do differently" opens it. This is not self-blame, it is self-command, and there is a profound difference. Those who master this distinction stop seeing themselves as victims of circumstance and begin to see themselves as participants in their own lives. They do not waste energy arguing with reality, they adapt to it. And while life will never be fair, it will always respond to discipline, because discipline compounds where excuses do not. The person who abandons this phrase begins to change, not because the world improves, but because their response does. And that is the essence of Stoic strength: to stand firmly in responsibility without bitterness or denial. Yet there is a phrase even more deceptive than this one, because it pretends to signal strength while quietly exposing insecurity and understanding. It is critical if you wish to speak with true wisdom rather than borrowed confidence. The final phrase reveals the deepest kind of intellectual stagnation because it blocks correction itself. And that phrase is, "I never make mistakes," or its close companion, "I was right all along." On the surface, it sounds like confidence, even strength, but in reality, it is fear disguised as certainty. The person who cannot admit error has placed ego above truth, and once that happens, learning quietly comes to an end. When someone insists they were always right, even when evidence clearly contradicts them, they are no longer engaging with reality, they are rewriting it to protect their self-image. This is not wisdom, it is fragility. Consider Daniel, a co-founder who insisted on a product decision that failed publicly. User engagement dropped, feedback was negative, data was clear, yet Daniel never once said "I was wrong." Instead, he explained why users were not ready, why timing was off, why marketing failed, why everyone else misunderstood the vision. Each explanation sounded intelligent on its own, but together they formed a prison. Because as long as he was never wrong, there was nothing to fix, nothing to improve, nothing to learn. The team stopped trusting his judgment, not because he made mistakes, but because he could not admit them. The Stoics understood this danger deeply. Marcus Aurelius wrote that if anyone could show him his error, he would gladly change, because the pursuit of truth mattered more than the preservation of pride. This is the dividing line between wisdom and foolishness. The unwise protect their ego at all costs, even if it costs them progress, while the wise are willing to be corrected, because correction sharpens the mind rather than diminishing it. Admitting a mistake does not weaken authority, it strengthens credibility because it signals honesty, self-awareness, and openness to reality. When you say "I was wrong," you reclaim the ability to adjust your course. When you refuse, you lock yourself into repeating the same outcome under new justifications. Pride becomes a loop, and growth becomes impossible. This final phrase connects back to every other one we have examined: claiming to know everything, refusing to change, hiding cruelty behind honesty, avoiding responsibility, performing confidence. All of them lead inevitably here to the inability to admit error. They are not separate flaws, but expressions of the same root problem: ego defending itself against discomfort. The Stoics did not teach self-denial for its own sake, they taught clarity. And clarity begins with the willingness to see yourself accurately. That includes seeing where you failed, where you misjudged, where your assumptions were wrong. There is no shame in that, only instruction. Every mistake contains information, but only if you allow yourself to access it. When you say, "I never make mistakes," you destroy the feedback loop that creates wisdom. When you say, "Here is what I learned," you transform failure into fuel. This is why intellectual humility is not weakness, but discipline. It requires strength to face your own errors without excuses or theatrics. It requires restraint to resist the urge to appear flawless. And it requires courage to value truth more than image. The Stoics believed that progress comes not from avoiding error, but from correcting it quickly and honestly. Each time you catch yourself reaching for one of these phrases, you are standing at a crossroads. You can choose comfort and remain unchanged, or choose awareness and grow. That pause, the moment where you decide not to speak reflexively, is where wisdom begins. Intelligence is not measured by how often you sound right, but by how willing you are to refine your thinking. When you let go of these phrases, you do not lose identity. You gain freedom. Freedom from habits that no longer serve you. Freedom from patterns that keep repeating. Freedom to evolve. This is the Stoic path: not perfection but progress, not silence but thoughtful speech, not pride but clarity. When you speak less foolishly, you think more clearly. And when you think more clearly, your life begins to align with intention rather than impulse. That alignment is the quiet power the Stoics were pointing toward all along.